Welcome. Welcome to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to a full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. This is Cade Massey hosting this week with one of my three longtime collaborators. Eric Bradlow is my co-host for the day. Eric's sitting in his office in West Philadelphia. I'm coming to you from Austin. Our two collaborators, Shane Jensen and Adi Wyner, are out doing Shane and Adi things. They'll be back, as you guys know. Some combination of us are here almost every week of the year, 48, 49 weeks of the year, and have been for more than 12 years now. We are recording on Tuesday afternoon. We're going to use our usual format. Guest in the first half of the show. If you're watching, you know it's football season because Stephen Godfrey is here with us. We'll introduce Stephen in a moment. We're going to do him for the first half hour. We'll do open lines in the second half hour. Stephen is a longtime friend of the show. He's been doing shows during the season, but especially our college football preview shows for years now. And he's our first college football guest of the year. Stephen, we're glad to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. As always, it's we kind of a little August tradition we got going now.
You do. I love the August tradition. You guys can catch, I want to share some of the places you can catch Stephen's work. He is the longtime founder of Split Zone Duo. I think he's kind of emeritus at Split Zone Duo now, but I hear him all the time on Yahoo's College Football Enquirer show, which I think is one of the best ones out there. Andy Staples and Ross Dellinger are the co-hosts on that, which gives me the bonus of hearing three guys with Southern accents talk about college football, which adds a little flavor. And then Stephen also has his Fandom Island podcast going. He does that with Ryan Nanny. It's a little bit more liberal take, wider ranging take on his show. And he's got an innovation on that show. He's got words and numbers, numbers and words. Tell us about this new
numbers and words.
Numbers and words. Okay, talk about that.
So we launched Phantom Island. And we're in our second year, and the first thing that we wanted to do, kind of as career football or college football professionals, was to widen the breadth of what we would discuss, ask a question that exists within the paradigm of the sports world, and leave it that broad. Right. Our first episode, I believe, was about the financial future of the Live Golf Tour. And then I think our third episode was WNBA refereeing. So we really wanted to stretch. But what we found was we still have that hardcore audience that wants to know about the backup left tackle at University X, Y, and Z. And so what we've done is kind of we've cordoned them off and say, like, all right, if you want to do this, we're going to come directly over here. So we have a new show called Numbers and Words, which is, I've got a couple different takes on describing it. I've said, hey, it's like auditing a 300 level class with an idiot, and I'm the idiot. It is an aggressive attempt at having an intelligent conversation about football. It's a lot of the usual suspects that we've had over the years: Parker Fleming, Bill Connolly. We're going to have our friend Dan Casey, who comes from a non-sort of quantitative side. He's going to be on a couple future episodes.
He's
a couple coaches.
Guy,
I don't want to spoil who. He is. I mean, he has written multiple books from sort of the I would say the sort of the young schematic coaching perspective, and has kind of made a living in media explaining and demystifying schematic concept for average fans. And so it's a little bit of, hey, let's take this jargon and unravel it a little bit, and let's introduce advanced concepts one at a time, and let's get people better educated while also having an intelligent conversation about what's going on in the world of football. And it's high school, it's NFL, it's college, it's all of it. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be college football, but it's non-dogmatic.
Okay. Stephen, one question that sounds so much like it's less focused on college football, but it sounds like your old podcast with Podcast Ain't Played Nobody with Bill Connolly, of course.
With old Bill Connolly. Yeah, Bill Connolly shows back up.
Okay. But what is why you, what is your connection? What is your interest? Because you always talk about it. You're the idiot. You didn't take math or whatever. And yet you're the guy that had that show with Bill, which was phenomenal. And now you're pursuing that angle again here. So where are you coming from?
I get really restless with sports content. I get really restless with sports journalism. So my background is obviously not quantitative. I've made 1,000 jokes on this show and others about being bad at math, at least in sort of a classroom setting. But I met Bill when we were on the same staff at Vox Media at SB Nation, and often found myself translating Bill by being willing to ask questions that other people didn't want to. Because one of the frustrations that I have with my capital J journalism colleagues is that there is this new thing in our generation, and especially in the younger generation of journalists, to act like you have all the answers. And that's not my job. My job is not to be an expert. My job is to ask questions, and my job is to better educate the people who are listening, tuning in, reading, whatever the platform might be. And so I make a lot of jokes that are self-deprecating, but by doing so, I'm lowering the inhibitions of the people I'm talking to, and I'm lowering the inhibitions of the audience. Because if I'm willing to say, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? And I say this and I say that a lot to people. Or, hey, I'm pretty good at pattern recognition. I'm pretty good at predicting, especially when it comes to in conversation, especially. I don't know what that is, but I think it's just a long career of being a writer and a reporter and being on whatever hemisphere of the brain that is. So I'm pretty good at predicting conversational structure. And so when people revert back to the jargon, or I have a lot of people who are experts in some form of data analysis or just statistics or whatever, they get really kind of nervous and they want to come on and I've got this really complex thing. But like, it's, hey, slow down. We're going to have a dinner party. All right. We're going to have a dinner party and the audience is going to be here. I'm going to point to one side of the camera and then you're going to be here. And my job is to make sure that everyone stays engaged at the dinner party. And good media is the conceit. That is the goal. It is not that I look good. It is not that I am the smartest person in the world. I learned this in betting with college coaches early on in my career. Finally, I learned it the hard way, where I was
Real quickly, you said embedding. You didn't say embedding. You said embedding, like a journalist embeds with a T.
EMBEDDING. I would, early on in my career as a young when I got on the national beat, I was working for a .com at the time that didn't have the kind of like gilded credentials of a Sports Illustrated or an ESPN. So I made a lot of bets on non-traditional storytelling. So Alabama wouldn't give me access the way I wanted to, or the way maybe like SI would. So I would go to Alabama's homecoming opponent, Western Kentucky, and I would spend 8 days with that coaching staff trying to see what it looked like to prepare for Alabama. You know what's funny about that, Cade? I say that the GA that they stuck me with in the pool, in the desks, the week that happened, is now the head coach at Oregon State.
Yeah.
Jamarcus Shepard. So like these people all grow up. But
sure.
I finally sat there. I remember sitting there one night, veteran defensive coordinator named Lance Guidry. He's been everywhere. And he was talking about, we're going to do this and then we're going to banjo. And I had full access, right? He's walking me through everything. And finally I said, hey, what is banjo?
Yes.
And in that moment, I thought like, I'm going to get kicked out of the club, but I'm not a football coach. It was never my job to learn it. My job is to communicate complex systems and ideas to as wide an audience as possible so that the public can better understand them. And so when the moment, and I'm ranting now about journalism, but the moment you lay down your ego, it's the same device Shakespeare used. The idiot was always telling you the story in every Shakespearean play. There is an idiot in a comedy, especially, or a tragedy, but mainly in the comedies. They are actually setting the pace of the narrative structure, and that's my job. So I'll gladly say, and by the way, I did fail Math 267 at Ole Miss, I think 3 times. Part of that was because I didn't show up. I mean, it wasn't necessarily that I'm that stupid. It was because 22-year-old me was a little different.
Had other things going on.
I apparently did.
Well, that's actually a revealing answer, because that posture is not the posture of a traditional journalist. And we certainly run it. We've seen it in lots of places, more hostility, somewhere between neglect and hostility towards the quant world. And you do have a different posture. I want to ask another media question of you. We'll eventually talk college football, but I did have a general thought coming into this conversation. Thinking about the various podcast efforts you have now and have had over the years, and the number of shows you do with Dellinger and Staples, and the amount y'all cover.
Talk about nerds.
How do you think about allocating your time across your whole professional portfolio, like writing versus podcasting now in 2026?
Yeah.
How do you optimize that, and how do you think about it?
So we're doing a podcast right now, but we're on camera.
Yeah, there's that too.
Okay?
Yeah.
And none of us went to college for this, right? None of us sought this out, right? So the platform evolves at such a pace that I don't know if we'll ever keep up anymore. I was a magazine journalist. I was a print journalism
Yeah.
magazine emphasis English minor.
Yeah.
And I'm not that old. I'm not. It's not. I'm not talking about. And I stepped on campus in 1972. No, this was recently, like somewhat recently. I have 3 kids now, but the platform has evolved, and you need to meet the audience where they're at. The evolution of podcasting, specifically in both audio and video form, have sort of conjured this parasocial dynamic. So I have a very dedicated audience that I'm a very appreciative of, and but it changes the relationship. You can be a longtime reader of a journalist or a writer, a columnist, analyst, whatever. I am with people in their most intimate moments.
Mm,
And it sounds
mm,
weird or funny, but what I've learned about podcasting is it's an extraordinary reach into
mm,
their lives.
mhm, mhm,
It's
mhm.
jogging, it's that moment of silence, it's mowing the lawn, it's washing the dishes, it's sitting in the commute that they don't want to. It's
You're
all of
alone with
that.
them. You're alone with them in those
Yeah,
moments.
yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah,
alone,
and
but for you. Mhm,
yeah, and so that's the biggest difference. As far as balancing, some of it is just meeting the market, right? I have, like I said, I got 3 kids. They don't get any cheaper. I've learned. So it is trying to run a successful business. Becoming a business owner. That's also something they did not
mhm,
tell me would happen in journalism. Look, man. I was supposed to be making a very, very comfortable, cushy
mhm,
6-figure gig as a celebrated feature writer and a
mhm.
takeout writer. We used to say in the magazine world. That's what I was going to do. 6 of those a year, win a bunch of awards, get with a sport coat with the patches on my
Yeah,
elbows,
yeah, yeah.
and the fat expense account, like they did in the 80s. And that there's a great book called The Sports Writer by Richard Ford, which is not exactly about sports journalism, but it describes this life. Oh, and like how much he got paid by the word. Good Lord. Uh, the world changed. The world changed is the answer. And if, again,
Okay.
to go back to ego, if you I know a lot of my counterparts are like, "I would never podcast. I'm a writer." And I'm like, "Cool, I got a mortgage." And also,
Sure.
the audience wants to be here, and the
Yeah.
idea that we can't work in complex thought just because we're on a microphone, to me, is so short-sighted.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Okay. One other state of the world question as we wade into
Yeah.
college football. I was raised on college football in West Texas on the early Dallas Cowboys, pretty good years of Longhorns. Been going to games all my life. Uh,
Yep.
in the same high school district as Friday Night Lights, all that stuff. I got it
So
hardcore.
you're from, like, Odessa, Permian, like, proper
San
West.
Angelo, San Angelo, just east of
Okay, yeah,
that.
yeah, that's
Same
West
high school
Texas.
district back in the day.
Yeah.
But I think it's possible that at age 59, I'm beginning to care a little bit less. And it's not just wisdom and maturity. I think it's the change in the game. I
Okay,
think
okay,
I might
okay.
be caring a little bit less. And I'm sad about that. And I'm curious whether I might be representative. But like this stuff that hopefully is going to it hasn't been nipped in the bud, but hopefully gets nipped eventually about
Yeah.
professional players coming back. And I realize it's a 5-year thing. It's like a moment, but still, the fact
Yes.
that Lane Kiffin is out there actively recruiting professional players to come back and play college football, never mind that they're former Ole Miss players that are transferring from your alma mater to LSU. This is all just new
Uh-huh.
levels of insanity. It's like Veep was amazing as a sitcom for a while until the world passed it. And then Veep wasn't interesting
It's
anymore as
hard
a
to watch
sitcom.
Veep. So I was on an
Yeah,
international flight 2 weeks ago, and you're hitting the Delta thing, and you're like running out of things to watch in 8
yeah,
hours. And
yeah.
I watched the first season of Veep, some of it, and you're exactly right because the writing is exceptional, but the parody doesn't hold.
No, no. So then say the college football reality has passed any possible parody at this point. It's past it just like Veep
I
got
feel
past.
like I feel like you're tempting fate there
I am. Well, that's true. Okay,
because
but tell
because
me,
I don't know if we've hit the bottom.
really?
There's
Okay,
still
this is what I'm asking you. This
yeah
is what I'm
yeah
asking you. What's going to
okay.
happen next? What's going to happen next? Like,
I
well,
th-
this
things
how? Go ahead.
things can calm down. So this specific instance that cropped up in the last 48 hours ish is actually a loophole in the process of closing. And it is the NCAA's
Yeah.
fault. Here's why. The fastest way to explain this is the NCAA did not want to issue a waiver for that 2022 class when they were closing out the COVID exception and then the 6-year rule. And so we knew in the industry this challenge was going to come legally from athletes between either the unlikely passage of the Save College Sports Act or whatever that stupid thing is called, and or the advent of a proper collective bargaining agreement and or legislation at the conference level that's enforced by the states. One of those things is going to stop the specific instance of a professional player in the NFL specifically going to these colleges, going back to these colleges, because this is different than any of the myriad scandals that we've talked about. And a scandal lowercase because I think it's very subjective. This is different than Brendan Sorsby and Texas Tech. This is different than the NIL. This is different than the portal because this has public consensus against it, and none of those things did. I was on the side of player agency early on in my career to the point where I kind of got blacklisted by a couple organizations, for writing about the bag man and all that kind of stuff. This is more similar to the Charles Bediako situation. It was the basketball player that left the NBA's G League to go back to the university or attempt to sort of re-enroll at the University of Alabama this past basketball season. Unlike, let's say, Trinidad Chambliss petitioning and suing to get an extra year of eligibility, where there was this really weird and sort of semantic interpretation of a medical redshirt season that he had at Division II Ferris State. There's no one side versus another here. The consensus that we see in our viewership, like on the Yahoo show, within the industry, amongst the executive leadership, within the agents, within the coaches, nobody likes this. No one likes this. And usually when you have a consensus like that, there are enough stakeholders with enough at risk to stamp this out. Now, the NCAA has fumbled easier procedures before. I have faith in their inability. But this one feels like it's an open and shut case.
So Stephen, let me just ask a question about that.
Yeah.
Let's imagine part of the reason someone might do this, it could be because of NIL money, but it could be also to enhance one's professional career, maybe personal brand, etc. If at the end of the day, colleges, you just saw the Big Ten said no, but if colleges don't like this and advertisers don't like this, why would a player choose to do this if this is going to be like, this is one of those people that went back? I'm not drafting them the second time. I'm an advertiser. They've got a stain next to them. I'm not going to pay them. Why? Someone has to like this.
It's a little bit more nuanced. It's very, very short-sighted. So let's look at Xavion Harris for a second. And everyone, like Todd Monken, the head coach of the Browns, is talking about like, hey, isn't this a screwed up world or whatever that quote was last week. So you have a tight end, plays very well for Ole Miss last year in Lane Kiffin's offense, is in camp with the Browns. I need to be clear because a lot of people are misinterpreting this in social media. And also, like, this is the stuff I get at, like, the school pickup line now. Like, when I'm picking my kid, like, people are like, what the hell? Kind of, it used to be like, when's Florida State going to the Big Ten? And now it's this. Florida State's not going to the Big Ten, by the way.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they could. They're a great research institution. This kid got cut by the Browns, right?
Yeah.
There's an immediate short-term financial opportunity. I would say that a tight end cut by the Browns indicates that his football career is short-sighted. I don't think, Eric, he would have a second bite at the apple unless he did something truly phenomenal. I'm going to be honest with you. We were talking about this. We recorded the College Football Enquirer on Yahoo this morning. He may not be the best tight end on the roster if he clears and is eligible at LSU. This is a depth play. Kiffin is always, he's a megalomaniac and he's, probably textbook sociopathic. And I'm not being hyperbolic.
Wow.
Lane Kiffin. No, I've been around the man. Like I've covered, like I'm telling you.
I'm up for explanations of him. So please, thank you.
He's doing this for a couple different reasons, but one of which right now is there's a tremendous anxiety setting in because that roster is not ready for prime time. And the expectation level in accordance with the finances for Kiffin's first year at LSU, we're gonna have a rough time, guys. I'm not saying that this is a 6-win team necessarily, but it's not a 12-win team. And so he's betting in the short term on let's burn through the resources that I'm afforded here at LSU by getting guys that I'm veteran, like that are veteran players for me, who they're known quantities in my system immediately. And let's also bolster. He's said a couple of things recently about depth that you get I've been doing this long enough to know that when a coach is getting ready to prep his excuses, and that's what it feels like. Yeah, I
Makes
don't
sense. That tight end's probably expected value is maybe close to zero. So why not go back to LSU? Maybe he can
make money.
A great season, maybe gets NIL dollars or not, but then, at least his odds of going to the NFL are higher than zero.
Right. Eric, are you a Jets fan?
Sure, let's pretend.
Okay. If I'm a Jets fan, I'm far more concerned with the Dante Moore situation during the NFL draft than I am with this. I get the unpalatable part of this. I do. Normally, I side with player agency and their ability to make a living off of their athletic ability for as long as they can. But this is hitting a firewall. This is the third rail. This is the sort of point of no return of playing in the NFL one day and going back to college. We don't like that. If I'm an NFL fan and if I'm an NFL GM, and I talked to an assistant GM who called me over the summer about this, they're kind of whining now. They're like, our draft pool's getting older. The running backs have more tread on the tire or less tread on the tires. And my response to that is pay better. Like if Dante Moore has a financial imperative to play one more year at Oregon, his draft stock was high. I want to be clear. This is not about a junior and I'm projected third. And if I really knock the eyes out of this season, I'm going to be projected first. No. It's the opposite. Dante Moore would have been a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, right? And in a certain circumstance, he might have been the overall pick. He turned that down because the finances at Oregon made more sense. He could go win a championship. And you could make a joke about the Jets or the Browns or a sort of historically woeful franchise and not wanting to play for them. I get that. But I don't think that was the Jets part of it. I don't think had any bearing on Dante Moore. I think it was smarter for him to have that bird in the hand. Let's say it was $6 million or $7 million or whatever. That was more than the rookie season of a contract as a first rounder would have paid under that NFLPA negotiated rookie wage scale. That is more concerning if you're an NFL fan or an NFL GM. This is just some hysteria that I'm confident is going to go away. But I also don't want to dismiss the weirdness. So I live in Nashville. 2 nights ago, I took my 2 oldest kids to the Titans Seahawks game. Got really good tickets. Kids got to be close to field level. It was as close they'd ever been to the speed and the physicality of the NFL game. That's why I went. I'm justifying that I went to a Titans preseason game. I feel like I kind of have to, to keep my credibility.
Yeah.
Terrible football. By the way, Seahawks 2s annihilated the Titans 1s. It is amazing to see the difference in talent. It's insane. Wow. There was a running back, and I can't even remember his name now, Hankerson, third string running back for the Seahawks that night. Doesn't matter, right? Second, third quarter, we're eating popcorn. We're watching this. The guy has 10 carries, whatever. It's preseason. The next day, he went into the transfer portal, and it really hit me. It really, for whatever reason, I've covered this for a while, but I took my kids. One of my kids is into the Seahawks, and he's got his Jackson Smith and Jigba jersey, and he's watching warm-ups. Cade, this is the Texas fan, so you gotta do a better job recruiting. I don't know what's going on here. This is tough.
That is tough. Tough.
It is tough. And then there's a player for the Seattle Seahawks, the defending world champions, who sought it out to at least give this guy, I think he had 10 carries in an NFL preseason game. And then, he's going to get cut. He might get picked up. If it's 10 years ago, he's going to be on the practice squad, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Or he's going to bounce around. No. Yeah. He played it. I think he played it like Oregon State. He's going to go and probably sign a maybe low power 4 group of 6, whatever we want to determine the new Pac-12 to be kind of. He might make $1.5 million. He might make $2 million this year. $2 million might be on the high end, but
wow, really?
I guarantee you he makes at least 6 figures, and I guarantee you it would be more than sticking around on a practice squad.
Yeah, right. And a better life probably as well. That's amazing. Okay, this is helpful. even hearing your take on Lane is helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you for all of that. Now let's talk a little bit of actual football.
Okay.
I'm going to hit you. Let's do some quick questions. And I realized
Sure.
that a number of my questions were big. This tells you how different the world is. My first 4 questions are all Big Ten. So rapid fire on Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln Riley. Do you believe in Lincoln Riley as SC back?
I believe that this is the fulcrum. I believe this is the assessment year. And I believe as goes the SC season, so goes the coaching carousel. I can give you a much longer answer, but there is an aggressive evaluation underway at Heritage Hall.
And if you had to bet, Stephen Godfrey betting which side that seesaw goes.
There are a lot of marriages at the top end of college football where the spouses are better off elsewhere right now, and one could imagine Lincoln going back to Lubbock in a certain situation.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. All right. They've also got a tough schedule that can't be in his favor and the way people get evaluated, right? I mean, that's.
I don't think he was a great cultural fit from jump, regardless of the status or the state of SC football, which I know was not great. And they suffer from a lot of nonsense. Like that's a how do I say this nicely? It's not a functional organ. Cade, you know what it is? It's Texas 15 years ago.
It's worse. It's Texas worse. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to know somebody's got it worse.
Follow up to that. Is there
Yes, sir.
Is there a counterfactual world where there's like, I don't know, a better coach that they can get? So I always think you can. They're okay. Then all right.
I'll be honest with you, Eric. Jen Cohen, the athletic director at SC, hired Kalen DeBoer at Washington, and they love each other.
And if there's one, is not a bad coach.
And if there's one thing, if there's one misrepresented asset or a misunderstood dynamic right now, it is that Kalen DeBoer is an exceptional head coach. But when you follow Nick Saban and the entire fundamental rules of the game change, you are never going to get your flowers.
Right. Right. It was going to be bad enough without the games changing, and he got both of those changes.
So beat the posse, as they say in West Texas.
All right. More Big Ten rapid fire expectations out of Penn State. Your expectations for Penn State this year? They're a little bit off the radar. There's so many strong teams at the top of the Big Ten. They're a little below radar, but I wonder if they can surprise people.
Yes. In the short term, I've always liked Campbell. I think this is the ideal big-time job for him. I think Becht is a great quarterback. He's solid, and I think all of the problems that plagued the last iteration of the James Franklin Swan song, it's the exact opposite dynamic in Happy Valley. I think the concerns that I might have would be longer term, and I would need to see like actual work product from the Campbell era in Penn State to even really apply concern to them. I like the hire a lot, which is hard to say usually when you have such a long and winding search, because the search did not go well. The search, Penn State's done a good job, I think, obfuscating that in the offseason, but the search was bad.
Yeah, but they got so lucky in the end.
So related to that, isn't when I think about Penn State, and I'm married to a Penn Stater, isn't the skill level just in aggregate like less than Ohio State? And is there any short run world where that's not true? And is that gap, a better way to frame it is the gap big enough that in some sense, let's be realistic about what Penn State can really do?
Okay. So that you've hit upon the existential problem at Penn State for the last 25 years as we've entered the modern era, which is Ohio State is the measurement. And then you're trying to identify your deficiency. Is it financial? Is it personnel? Is it the combination thereof? Is it a leadership philosophy? Franklin, for a long time, traded very healthily on, I don't think that's a word. We don't have this, and that's why I lost this big game. Look at Penn State. He said this off the record to every colleague of mine in the national college football scene. It was immediately like, look what they've got in Columbus. Look what they've got in Ann Arbor. That's what we need here. So, the deep irony of that is he was really, truly handed, I would say, a comparable set of assets in 25, and then you saw the result. I think Franklin's better off as a disruptor, sort of like, he's much better off trying to sort of doing the upstart bit than he is managing a legacy brand. Now, that being said, Penn State had to learn some really hard lessons during the Franklin era. I think Campbell's going to be a better cultural fit there.
Great. Okay. Another coaching change over the season in the Big Ten, Kyle Whittingham.
Yes.
Setting aside maybe modest expectations for Michigan this year, how good is that fit, and what are your expectations for Michigan going forward? This has been a great era for Big Ten football. Might it be the case that Michigan is actually going to step right up and be at the same level within the next year or two because of Whittingham?
Yeah, so I'm really bullish on Whittingham because he was undervalued, I think, by virtue of where he was, which is we have a geographic bias in this sport that is unlike anything else I've ever seen. I mean, it really is dumbest. It is to go back to Moneyball as a concept, right? When I'll just use the film because it's the most common example. Like you're discounting an athlete on the way they look. In college sports, we so often discount the equity of a coach or the value of a leader, usually not so much an athlete, more in the coaching world. On if they're out west, there's a weird invisibility west of the Rockies.
Okay.
I cannot explain it. I don't endorse it. It is the dumbest damn thing I've ever seen. I watch it at the coaching convention every year. Oh, he's a West Coast guy. What the hell does that mean? This is like, I mean, does West Coast football not translate if you're in the Midwest or the South or the Northeast? It's I don't understand it, but I think Whittingham has not received the level that he deserves of, I don't know, regard.
Yeah.
And I think he's going into the perfect situation with a distressed asset in Michigan. The smartest thing here for Michigan to do, because they're also searching for an AD simultaneously, is to stop thinking that every Michigan-created problem needs a Michigan solution. And they're finally breaking out of that sort of intellectual inbreeding of the Michigan man. Go out and get best player available, right? AD, best player available. Coach, dude from Utah who did not have any affiliation with the university, but is incredibly well prepared for this job. That's why I'm bullish on them. And also, I mean, there's no finesse or fancy way to say this. If you've watched Kyle Whittingham coach teams, they are exceptionally violent in the most effective way possible.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. Is there any chance he surprises this year one, with a questionable quarterback? Or
No, I think they
unproven
could go to the
quarterback?
playoff. I mean, I think they're in. If there's the Mendoza line for playoff eligibility in the Big Ten, I think it's Michigan, USC floating at the line for sure.
Okay. I'm going to continue rapid fire in the interest
By
of time,
the
but
way,
I
was
got
that a pun with the Mendoza line?
It was. It really isn't. I've been trained on that phrase as a kid.
No.
Mendoza's.
I know the other phrase too. I was just asking you.
Mendoza line is. It was a. Was he a Pirates player? I can't remember who Mendoza was now.
I don't have
Could be,
the Mendoza
but
line.
batting 200, that's the Mendoza.
Batting 200, right? Yeah. I just always heard my dad say that when I was a kid.
I was just referring to the Indiana.
But I was raised a Braves fan,
also
so
see what's next on Cade's list, so that's why.
Okay.
I'm going to skip. Indiana's received enough. They've got enough attention. Besides, we don't need to do Indiana. Let's do
wow.
SEC outside of Texas and Georgia, who are kind of a consensus top two. Who do you like best out of the next set of contenders? And you've already told us
non-Texas, non-Georgia,
non-Georgia, non-Texas.
Oh man, Cade, that's a good one. I have a lot of, to go back to the Mendoza line, I have a lot of on the cusp case studies for playoff inclusion. So it's a lot of questions about Oklahoma. I would put A&M above Oklahoma. The talent, the core of talent is still there at Ole Miss. They have kind of refit that offensive staff to provide as smooth a transition away from Kiffin and Weiss as possible. So you would include them. I spend more of my time on the SEC looking at new programs. Florida, Auburn specifically. I think Kentucky is going to be a really interesting study in the next 2 or 3 years. But what you're
like the new coach, you like the new coach that much? Is that the
I think Will Stein is great, but I think that Kentucky woke up and looked across the state line at a basketball rival and said, that's replicable.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
One of the funny things about the state of Kentucky is that historically, the only boosters who cared as much about football as basketball were just the far East Kentucky, the Cole contingent. You'd see these license tags in Kentucky that say Friends of Cole. And over the last 10 years, as that relationship got really bad between the AD, Mitch Barnhart, and the former coach, Mark Stoops, football's importance and relevance started to really take hold amongst one of the signature basketball fan bases in all of America. And what I mean by that is the relevant, like, you will survive the breaking apart of conferences and the inevitable march to a super league if you are good in football from a revenue and television standpoint. It is the strongest magnet to pull you out of a problem. Indiana knew this when they invested the way they did so aggressively. And I think Kentucky's kind of looking around and saying, like, well, we are in the Southeastern Conference. So it's just one to keep an eye on for 2 years. And I like the staff he assembled.
Well, that's interesting, and that you're emphasizing the importance of institutional support, which never has been more important in the age of.
I ducked your question though.
You weren't. You weren't. I'm gonna let you. You didn't even answer.
Third best in the SEC.
Yeah, basically. I think you're on A&M at the moment.
Who can I make mad right now?
Ole Miss or A&M is where you came out.
It's technically Alabama.
Oh, you didn't mention Alabama.
It's just the volatility of that situation in terms of institutional support for DeBoer is there, but the impatience of that fan base, and they just named, oh my gosh, this morning, it's not Austin Mack, it's the other kid that's more talented allegedly, and apparently made it a very easy decision. They just named the starting quarterback there, Williams, I think, who's less experienced.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of inexperienced quarterback play in the SEC this year, so you're going to see volatility.
So let me ask a related question to that. Like, we've heard for years that, it's hard for like non-Power 2 schools to get non-conference games scheduled. But now that the playoffs have expanded, like, do you think we'll see more of that? And second, like, I was just thinking about last year's national championship game. How happy are you if you're Miami? Like, let all these other teams play real games during the regular season. You'll sweep up the ACC.
Eric.
No, I'm just saying the ACC on average is not as good as those other conferences. So all they have to do is win that ACC, maybe even come in second, depending. Probably not, but they, all they have to do is win that. Then they're in, and then you know what? Then the real Miami can show up. Wouldn't you rather be them than Alabama right now?
No, I think the ACC is like, you're just happy if you don't get food on your clothes when you eat. If you're the ACC, like, they can't even determine a conference champion. Like, they were so desperate to not be picked apart in the last round of realignment that they made structural additions and decisions that are essentially impossible to govern. They've painted themselves into a corner in logistics. I believe they have approximately 41 teams now. But the problem
from
is
41 states.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
The sport is so stupid. The two Bay Area teams are in the Atlantic Coast Conference. SMU was a really sharp addition. If we were to talk about the ACC for a second, actually, I think SMU is doing every single thing right because their ambition and their capital are aligned.
Back to institutional support. They saw the opportunity. They were unabashed about it. They really pushed that thing forward. They did it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think, Eric, to your point, it is easier to a certain degree, but I think you're going to lose the benefit of that doubt in playoff seeding, because the flip side to Miami is who played really good defense when it mattered most in the postseason. The flip side is they were on, again, the Mendoza line, the cut line of playoff inclusion. Had they remember, if you flip the Notre Dame Miami result, we have a very, very different situation.
Oh yeah.
So the problem with the coasting mentality for a Texas Tech or a Miami, you include maybe SMU, BYU, Clemson, and Florida State are so down right now, I wouldn't include them at the moment. But the problem there is that you don't really have a mulligan. You don't really get to mount the argument that my 4-loss schedule was worthy of inclusion to the postseason. Your margin for error is basically nil, especially in the Big 12.
I was also going to ask you, Cade, I'm sure Massey, Peabody, or all the ranking systems have to think about this. Like, obviously being in the top 4 of the playoffs is great because you get a bye. And so
we think,
for an ACC school,
they've lost them all. No, did they have lost them all? They lost them all.
Indiana won their bye last year, and that's it.
Yeah, my only comment was, like, this is to Steven's point, Miami may have a better chance of getting in, but a lower chance of being a top 4. So on the one hand, they're in the dance, but on the other hand, they're not going to get a bye. So which way do the odds, in some sense, those two factors, in some sense, work against each other? So
Yes.
I'm just asking, though, even though they may have a higher probability of getting into the tournament, they may have a lower probability of getting a bye, which basically cuts in half at best their probability of winning the whole thing. That's all I was.
Yes, and this is also where we have to incorporate the conversation about conference championships, because the irrelevance of the conference championship game is increasing. While the product might be
Right.
good,
Mhm.
Georgia Texas was a banger, as the kids say. Ohio State Indiana was must watch television last year,
Mhm.
and we know
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
market value because we've seen those individual games sold off by their
Mhm.
partners, so we
Mhm.
know what they fetch, and it's a lot. But the problem
Mhm.
is, I think they're counterintuitive to a national championship campaign.
Mhm. For
If
sure.
if they're not counterintuitive, they are a tremendous nuisance and I would say a legit injury concern. Cade, that Georgia Texas game 2 years ago
Yeah.
was about the sort of, again, to use a scientific term, the thumpingest game that I've seen in a long time that didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like the
Well,
physicality of those lines on both sides against one another, and then the kind of wear and the
yeah.
injuries that I think
Yeah.
they affected
They
Georgia more.
knocked Beck out, right? So that
Right, so
changed
they
the.
affect Georgia more going into the Sugar against Notre Dame that year, but I also I think it's a drag on Texas, and I'm not the person who waves the SEC it beats each other up flag. I think there's I don't love that as an excuse. That's become a blanket excuse for Indiana, and that's just not that doesn't work. I'm sorry.
No.
Um,
The trouble is it's probably true, but it doesn't work for everything. So that's the trouble. So people
yes,
are so
yes.
tired of hearing it. And
I think it's an over application. It's not a
yeah.
logical fallacy. I just
Yeah.
think I think it becomes a sort of knee jerk reaction.
Okay. Well, y'all are both on my last question, and we really do have to
Okay.
let Stephen go. But the last question is your championship pick, and I've settled in my playing the quant for a moment,
Mhm.
playing the base rates, Eric. I have Eric's argument, which is why wouldn't I just say Notre Dame, Miami, because they have the easiest roads. They're of the 7 or 8 most eligible teams. They're the only two that are outside of the Power 2 conferences with much easier roads. I buy that they have less room for error. But if I just just pick, like, don't overthink it. Like, which one of these 3 monsters is going to come out of the Big Ten? Which one of the
Yeah.
big 2 or 4 are going to come out of the SEC? Just go Notre Dame, Miami, and you're going to get one of them right.
I don't believe in Miami as a returning entity quite as strong as it sounds like you guys do, at least in
Okay.
terms of making the championship game, because I do look
Okay.
back on that road in the playoff bracket last year, and I think a lot of things swing a certain way. I do think they're improving. They are better in terms of, like, if there's a war, they're better at quarterback considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Mintz
Mm-hmm.
is going to allow them to develop. Oh my God, their offensive coordinator, my name just blanked, is going to be a very hot coaching commodity.
Okay.
Almost got the Tulane job before Will Hall did. His
Okay.
name will come to me in a second. But the best pick, if you were actually trying to guess correctly, is Notre Dame by virtue of the schedule, the experience, and then I think where they're at with skill positions and depth
Mm-hmm.
against the Big Ten champion, not because the South has fallen, but because it's actually a little bit of an endorsement of what we just said, Cade. The middle class of the Big Ten got the memo the latest about the evolution of college football. So while the high
Mm-hmm.
end has profited and been very sharp, and in Indiana's case, very market savvy, sort of hack the system or whatever they want to say. You have Ohio State, you have Michigan, you have Indiana right now. The middle class of the Big Ten are still 5 years away every time I talk to recruiting analysts. And I think some will get there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Oregon, by the way, I would include in that top class. I
Oh,
left
for
them
sure.
off.
Yeah,
Yep.
for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
And I do think Washington is sort of something to watch in terms of that playoff cut line. I don't think they're like a title contender necessarily. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it'll be interesting to see how they receive the quarterback coming back, all that drama, another Lane Kiffin drama.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be really honest with you right now. You can still kind of knuckle down and plow through the back end of your conference schedule if you are a have in the Big Ten. You could be a little bit fresher, and I do think it probably puts you in a pole position once you get into bracket seeding, at least as we understand the current 12-team format. So the safest answer is a comprehensive evaluation of Notre Dame, inspiring some faith there, pardon the pun, And then the Big Ten champion, data-wise, I think the sauce is out. The SEC has yet to deliver the 1-1A sort of tip of the spear program in this 12-team format. I don't think you've seen the Kirby Smart Georgia of 22-23.
Yeah.
Like, because of the market pulling apart the 5 stars and dispersing it at Ole Miss, dispersing it at Oklahoma. That's the problem that they haven't solved for yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just to put you on the point before we let you go, if you had to put your chips on somebody out of the Big Ten, you're going to team up against Notre Dame. I love the logic you just made. It makes perfect sense. It's a great structure. But if you had to bubble one team up, a lot of people are on Oregon this year. People still have Ohio State number one. I can't believe they're not going to step back, but I can't believe Indiana's not going to step back. But who do you have coming out?
The safest pick is Ohio State. It is America's professional college football franchise.
That's the safest pick in college football for the last 15
Absolutely.
years.
And they will continue to be so because of the way that they comport themselves. I give them that credit because of their program building philosophies and because they're ruthless about analytics, because they're sharp enough and maybe cold enough to pull the Will Howard move, which then wins them the national championship 2 years, helps win them the national championship. I don't think everybody immediately thinks of Will Howard on the 2014. They're probably thinking about Caleb Downs. But for fun outside of that, let's have a genuine conversation about Michigan if they're healthy.
Oh, wow.
Because that style at Utah translates faster than people may understand for what Michigan is capable of and their current personnel. Also,
did Bob Stoops win the national championship in his first year at OU? He surprised everybody.
No, so 99 is his first year, and they lost to my alma mater as the Millennium hit. As the Millennium hit, Cade, December 31st, 1999, they lost the Independence Bowl to Ole Miss.
Oh, okay. So I must have the wrong year.
They won the next year.
The next year. It was year 2. Okay.
Yeah.
I repress most things.
I was about to say that's a convenient omission for a Texas fan.
Yes. Okay, so Michigan, that's intriguing, super intriguing. That'd be fun. Okay. All right, Stephen, we have to let you go. Thanks for the time, man. Stephen Godfrey, really appreciate. And you guys chase him down. Phantom Island podcast, words and numbers, numbers and words.
Numbers and words. The free feed will be out in 2 weeks. If you're a Phantom Island subscriber at phantomisland.show, you're going to get all that, the exclusive stuff, plus like the coach gossip. But like we also have evergreen content. So Bill's going to come on and talk about the misrepresentation of scheduling strength in scheduling P4s. That's going to be this week's episode.
All right. Sounds good. You also catch Parker Fleming up there occasionally. You can also catch Stephen on Yahoo's College Football Enquirer podcast, which is one of the absolute best college football podcasts out there. All right, Stephen.
Thank you guys so much.
Let you live. All right.
Thank you guys.
That's been the first half of Wharton Moneyball. We'll be back with the second half after this break. Welcome back. Welcome back to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to the second half, or in this case, the last quarter of this week's show. We had a long first half with our friend Stephen Godfrey. Stephen graced us with 45 minutes on college football, our first college football guest of the year, and he's a great way to start. It reminds me of last year. I think it was last year he was explaining kind of Indiana to us and all that had happened when they recruited Cignetti over. And we had flashes of that in the first half of the show, Eric, where Stephen just goes into these long details about things that I didn't know and helps me understand things that I didn't know, even though I pay a lot of attention to college football. It's delightful to get that chance.
I love the discussion where it ended about the implications. And that was a question I was going to ask him. What do people not understand? Well, is it the statistics or the implications of them? But I loved his last discussion about the implications of the lack of depth in the Big Ten and its implications there, because you can go really deep in the SEC and have a hard team to face. But in the Big Ten, it's just not that way, which is why you have to give even extra points to the upper tier of the Big Ten. I thought that was a great discussion because it talks about both depth, but then it has, and then the part I love talking about is, and what's the implication of that? You can you can just measure team strength, but what does it mean? So I thought that was great.
Yep. All right, let's open it up a little bit. Just a quick programming note. We are now into our football windup in that we're going to have football guests for the next couple of weeks. We have a week 0 this week in college football with a pretty light schedule. Then week 1 will be next week. We'll have guests again next week to talk college football. And then the week after that, we will dive into professional football. All right, Eric, what else around the world of sports has your eye right now?
Well, I've been a baseball fan my entire life, and I was at a game Sunday that I've never experienced before. It was the greatest, not because of its implications, the way it happened. It was the greatest game I've ever been to,
What?
literally.
Really?
So I'll explain the situation for our listeners. So I was at the Phillies-Cardinals game on Sunday. Here was the situation. Phillies were down 4-0 going into the bottom of the ninth. Harper leads off the inning with a double. There's now 2 flyouts. So we're talking about 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, down 4-0 with a man on second.
Tell us something about who's on the mound for the Cardinals. I don't know the person, but are we scared of him? Is he good?
It's their reliever. Top reliever's on the mound.
Top reliever. And Harper is batting third or something, so they're at the top of the order? Second, third?
They're now down to number 6 in the order because Harper's third. So Arraez flies out, and I think it was Stott flies out. So they're now down to 6. Realmuto is up. Okay? He's got an 0-2 count. Now, before the inning started, Fangraphs had the Phillies at 0.4%. Now that's before there's 2 outs and an 0-2 count.
Right.
Okay. Realmuto singles. It's now first and third. They let him steal second because that running's meaningless. The next guy walks. Okay, now it's bases loaded.
But we're batting 8th now. The 8th batter.
Now the 8th guy is up.
Okay.
Mundo Sosa doubles down the line. Drives in 3. They're still down 4-3, by the way.
2 outs, 1 man on.
Then De La Cruz comes up, singles him home.
Wow.
And then Schwarber hits a 460-foot home run.
He didn't. Schwarber finished it. He walked it off.
It wasn't goes to extra innings. Now, I've never, again, I want to say 3 batters in that
And you
movie.
were there. You were there. You were there for that.
2 of my 3 sons and my wife.
Absurd.
3 times in that stretch, they were down to the last strike.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it. And
Eric, was it the same? Was it the same pitcher? They didn't leave the same guy in there for all that.
Yes, they did.
Same guy. Oh my!
That's the part we were shocked. There was no pitching change. It was the same guy left in there. So look, whether it's 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000, I'm pretty sure I saw 1 in 1,000 at least.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a comeback like that in a game before. And this never, first of all, I've never left a game in my life. certainly didn't leave the game. About a third of the people left in the 9th inning. I never leave. But my family and I, we sat there for 30 minutes after the game just looking at the field. We could not believe what we had seen.
Yeah.
And I think this is, Adi talks about this all the time. I really do believe this might be one of the rarest events I'll ever see in sports.
Seems reasonable. It actually seems reasonable. And great fun that you were there. It's awesome.
So that's what caught my eye this week. Oh, a lot of things caught my eye, but that was one of them.
All right. Let me jump in with a couple. I'll start with one. The new FedEx playoff format in golf is interesting, and partly because somebody tweeted about this in the last week or two, and we were like, yeah, that we would love that. Somebody said, so FedEx playoff, that's what we're in the middle of right now. And last week they had the next to last Wyner Clark wins the field of 50. They cut it to 30, and they're going to play it this weekend, the championship, with no handicaps, no starting positions various, just top 30 guys. Everyone's starting at the same level, and we'll go from there. That's new this year. But someone tweeted in the last year, how great would it be if in the last 30 they went, or the last 32, if they wanted to tweak it up, they went match play, because match play has got so much drama. And sure enough, today, they just announced 2 years from now in 2028, they're going to play match play at the end of this tournament. They're going to change it up a little bit. Eric and I were just diving into the details here. Looks like the first week will be 90, and they'll play a week that way, and that'll be the end of the season. Then the top 32 roll into a 2-week match play format. The first is 8 groups of 4, 8 pods, if you will. It's kind of like round robin group play in the World Cup. And then the top 2 out of each of those pods come out for the final 16-man match play tournament on the final weekend. I think it's great. I think it's a great way to set the whole thing up. It'll make it much more distinct versus the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think they went a little overboard. Do you remember? I mean, Kate, you've talked about design for our 12 and a half years on the show. And if you think about the way the FedEx playoffs was, none of us liked it, which is the top guy started at -10, and then, some other guys -9, and the 30th place guy 0. And now they've gone to the other extreme.
Yeah,
Scotty
that's true.
Scheffler's clearly number one, and he has no advantage over, I'm making up if this is number 30, Ryan Fox or whoever it is. I think that's who it is. Like nothing, no advantage come the no, that's maybe too extreme the other way.
Okay.
So this seems to be something in between in the sense that, I mean, yes and no. I assume there's going to be a seeding. So like,
That's what you're banking on. That's what
yeah, it
that's what
has
will make it.
there
Yeah,
has to be. There
yeah.
has to be. Whether it's I doubt it'll be deterministic. It'll be random within buckets of 4 because you don't want someone to say, I don't want to be in the group with Scotty. Therefore, I'd rather be the number 7 in the world than the number 5 because this, that, you can't do that. But there has to be randomization within blocks of 4. Like the top 4 get randomized, then the next 4,
Yeah,
then the next 4. It
just like
has to
group
be.
just like group play in the World Cup. You
Yeah, yeah.
presume that's the case. But what we don't know, and we have 2 years to talk about this, but the idea of spreading that match play out across 2 weeks is an interesting feature here. And I'm guessing, without knowing the details, the downside of match, of course, Eric, is that you're introducing much more randomness. I mean, the
Absolutely.
head-to-head matchups in golf is like wildly less based on true fundamental value than is 72 holes of stroke play.
Yep.
But it's more fun, it's more drama. So I suspect what they're doing in that first week of 8 pods of 4 is something to add a little bit of sample size in there so that the 16, that is the second 16 at least. Now, once you get to second 16, you're playing straight up match, I think. But the second 16 will be determined a little bit more truthfully than the second 16 will be, what am I saying? The first cut will be a little bit more sample based, truth based than the final one.
So what's interesting here also is let's imagine there's 2 latent player abilities. One is stroke playability and the other is match playability. How correlated do we think those are? Like you could imagine, for example, a very consistent player who's really good at stroke play because, that's great. But in match play, you got to win holes, not tie holes. So I'm just wondering also, like, does this make us think a little bit differently on who the best player is? Like, because which best do you mean? Do you mean if they played a 72 stroke play tournament, or do you mean if they did match play?
Yeah, I don't know if we've talked about this very much. We talk about Ryder Cup when it comes around because that's the only real
Yeah, right.
match play that we see people play. But I thought you were going to do something different there. I thought you were going to do a typical Eric Bradlow choke momentum kind of thing. So you could say, is there something different about match play because it's head to head? There's a
No,
different
I
kind
was
of
talking
pressure.
literally
You're
about, you know,
you're talking about variance. You're talking about
yeah,
essentially.
variance. This is your favorite. You love
Well,
variance.
and the beauty of match play, anybody who's a duffer like most of us are appreciates this. There's no difference between losing a hole if you lost it by 1 stroke or 4. You have a quad on a hole and it
Yeah, who
doesn't matter.
cares?
And so for those of us who blow up occasionally, a high variance golfer, there's less penalty because the score is just binary, either one or it's trinary, I guess, or it ties. So I like the idea that maybe high variance golfers, surely people have looked at this. We don't have much data to work with, but are high
Right.
variance golfers conditional on the quality of golf or the underlying, stroke play average? High variance golfers I think we'd say, should be more successful in match play formats.
You would think, but just remember the thing it's one of those interesting design questions. Let's forget the one tournament that is match play during the year. Um, they're playing stroke play. So it's not clear you're getting a clear estimate of variance. You're getting an estimate of variance, but under a stroke play format.
Yeah.
So that's just an interesting statistical question. You don't have any data on
Yeah.
variance under a different format.
Yeah. That's right. That's a very good analyst's observation, Eric. Like we can't say, strictly speaking, we can't infer very well.
The only other thing I'd like to talk about with regards to
Please.
golf was They asked, it was very interesting. They asked Rory McIlroy who he thought should be player of the year. And they said, well, Wyndham Clark just won his third tournament. And McIlroy almost, he didn't say it this way. He said it almost. He didn't say it exactly the way I'm going to say it, but he almost said it this way. He goes, don't you guys realize that it's not about wins? Like, he basically was doing a Moneyball argument. He goes,
Did he?
who has the best stroke play? Scheffler. Who has the best, greens and regulation? Scheffler. Who's got the best? He goes, why don't you, yeah, all right, so he's won twice instead of 3 times. How about his 5 second place finishes? How about he leads in every advanced metric on tour?
Oh, man.
He says, now, if Wyndham Clark wins this week, okay, then we'll have a different discussion. But it was so beautiful. I wanted to cry. He was making he goes, why, 2 wins, 3 wins, okay. Yeah, but Scotty's the best golfer.
Well, that's great, but it was nice that he put a limit on this. Like, okay, if it's a 2-win difference or a 3-win difference across the players, now we'll start talking about it. But if it's almost a tie, then come on, or even a one-win deficit. That's great. We should track that down. Adi could use that in some of his classes. I think that would.
Yeah,
be
it was just great to hear Rory McIlroy talk about that, and also he didn't give up some fake argument like, well, hasn't he won enough of them? He's like, what does that have to do with anything?
Right. It's awesome. Rory's impressive. Let me give you one more, and it's kind of in the same spirit. I think we should celebrate Bill Barnwell's annual columns on teams most likely to improve in the NFL and teams most likely to regress. He's been doing this for a while now, like 10 or 12 years, I think. And, Bill doesn't write a column that's not 3,000 words. And so you got to saddle up if you're going to read these things. And I haven't read this year's, but I saw that they came out, and I want to name a couple things. Just the teams. Well, that's just the premise is what I want to celebrate, because he's fundamentally going at regression to the mean. He's saying, before we dive into finer details about whose offensive line has a better scheme for the left tackle, let's talk about high-level statistical tendencies. You got to start with regression to the mean. So he looks at factors. We should have these more rote than I do, but close wins, for example, close wins, close losses, injury luck, fumbles recovered, turnover luck, that kind of thing. And he stacks this up and he says, these are the teams that got the worst of those draws last year, and therefore, conditional on everything else, holding everything else equal, we expect them to come up. And these are the teams that got the best of those draws last year, holding everything else equal. We expect these to come down. I think Bill has made NFL conversations smarter because he's been doing this column every year. This is now in the conversations at all levels, which is where it ought to be. But also, good fun, a good place to start as we start thinking about NFL. Bill's expected fallers. That was today's column, I think. Carolina Panthers, I'm sorry to hear that for our friend Eric Eager. The Chicago Bears, Denver Broncos. For some reason, I don't like Sean Payton. I'm happy to see Broncos on that list. Jags and Pats. I'm sorry.
Pats have to be number one. I mean, how many close games did they win? They had the weakest schedule. I mean, I'd have to believe that Pats. I don't know what the win-loss projection is for them. If it's got to be something 10.5 or something, 9.5, 10.5.
I'm with you. By the way, I should have said with Barnwell that he tracks his performance, like of these teams, how many actually improve each year and how many regress. He's got a record. It's a very impressive record that his column is accurate on average. Okay, the risers, the more fun list, the risers. I'm happy to report that the Baltimore Ravens are on this list. Kansas City Chiefs. How could the Chiefs not be there? We're 6-10 or some crazy thing. With 6-11 last year. Detroit Lions, who remember took a big and surprising step back last year. The New York teams, the Giants and the Jets. How long?
He doesn't say they're going to the Super Bowl. He just says they're going to rise.
That's right. They're going to rise. But this is like an annual celebration of regression to the mean, and you just can't. This is a boring topic, but you just can't pay enough attention to regression to the mean if you want to understand the world.
Look, all I'll say is I think it was you or Adi said this stat a few years ago. Roughly, you should expect half the teams that made the playoffs last year to not make it this year. I think that's beautiful about the NFL. I really do. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that's not true in the NBA. I'm pretty sure that's not true maybe it's true in hockey. I don't know. That seems too much. I think the NFL, the amount of mixing you get is just tremendous. And the fact that it's half, it gives hope. I don't know if I'm the Panthers. Panthers weren't that far off. The whole NFC South stinks. So why can't the Panthers win the division? Sure they can.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right, man. Why don't we leave it there? It's fun to be talking football again,
Yeah.
and we will do so again next week. For the whole team here, Eric Bradlow's been in here for the whole show. Shane Jensen in absentia, Adi Wyner in absentia. For our guest this week, Stephen Godfrey, our producer, Jacob Krodnick, the boss lady, Dee Patel. Thank you guys for listening. Come back and join us next time. Between now and then, enjoy your sports.